The United States lost over 3 million manufacturing jobs.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
Game on here. A trade war between the United States and China is here. It's real at the stroke of midnight.
We'll take you straight to the White House. The President of the United States announcing new trade tariffs against China.
In this trade war, which country has the most to lose, the United States or China?
Hi, my name is ASHWANI. I will present about the background of trade war between United States and China and also the scenarios of the issue for economic issue. In January 2018, United States President Donald Trump began setting tariff and other trade barriers on China with the goal of forcing it to make changes to what the United States says are long-standing unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. The Trump administration stated that these practices may contribute to the United States-China trade deficit and that the Chinese government required to transfer of American technology to the China. In response to United States trade measurement, the Chinese government accused the Trump administration of engaging in nationalist protectionism and took retaliatory action. After the trade war escalated through 2019, in January 2020, the two-sided reached a tense Phase 1 agreement and is expired in December 2021 with China failing by a wide margin to reach its target for United States import to China. Next, I will present about the scenarios of the issue. The main factor of trade war between the United States and China is to reduce the deficit of bilateral trade and bring Americans' jobs back to home. The trade balance deficit is the most significant of several issues that the United States acknowledge are present in its trade relation with the People's Republic of China. Although the United States trade deficit with China hit a record low in May 2019, the problem has been growing for decades and is still on the rise. The United States does not deem trade with China to be fair. According to a report, 1.2 million American employment are supported by United States export to China and 197,000 Americans are directly employed by Chinese multinational corporations, which made 105 billion in investment in China in 2019. Next, main factor of trade war between United States and China is to reduce high-tech capacity of China. China is the main importer of material and part for many completed electronic products. The United States is not satisfied with China's requirement on creating joint venture for technology transfer as a contribution to authorize share capital of local companies. Another sensitive topic is Chinese public investment creating unfair competition in global market. The United States has been alerted by China's success in implementing a strategic plan for production modernization, increase in production of robots, lithium batteries, and network equipment. The United States has been increased import tariff up to 25% on electronic products from China, including telecommunication and network equipment.
I'm NOOR FAIHAA and I will present about the factors of the outbreak in the term of policy issues. One of the policy issues of the trade war is that it is supposed to prevent the growth of China's military strength. It is completely unattainable for the United States to allow China to attain military superiority even in the long run. The United States has also expressed concern about China's rising military and economic power and its perceived threat to United States national security. As a result, the United States is taking steps to maintain its economic advantage in the national security sector and to keep China from adopting American dual-use technologies. The United States government has taken several steps to limit China's access to these technologies, including imposing export controls on certain goods and technologies, restricting investment by Chinese companies in certain sectors, and taking legal action against Chinese companies for intellectual property theft. Next, the trade war has also been fueled by broader political tensions between the United States and China, including disagreement over human rights. The United States and numerous other foreign nations have referred to China's activity in Xinjiang as genocide. The United States has imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and companies involved in human rights abuses and has effectively banned all imports from the region through its Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. The United States Department of State announced visa restriction on senior officials for their responsibility in abuses in Xinjiang. Furthermore, the decision by the United States Department of Homeland Security to detain shipments at United States ports of entry containing cotton and cotton products originating from the Xinjiang production and construction corps is based on credible information that these products were made using forced labor. The United States government has also taken a strong stand against human rights abuse in Xinjiang and has implemented measures to prevent the importation of goods made with forced labor, including cotton and cotton products. The detention of this shipment is one such measure and is aimed at preventing the importation of goods that are made using forced labor.
The current dispute between the United States and China also can be examined through the lens of neoliberalism. They argue that states want to increase their leverage over one another. The states seek hegemony because doing so is essential to its continued existence. To be a global or regional hegemon is the state's ultimate ambition. The system shall be stable with no single dominant state. Neoliberalism is a theory of international relations that places a strong emphasis on how power influences state behavior in global system. According to Britannica website, the American political scientist Kenneth Walsh said that neoliberalism was an attempt to convert classical realist idea into the terminology and methodologies of contemporary social science. Neoliberalism proposed that in a competitive international environment, government act in their own self-interest and seeks to maximize their power and security. Neoliberalism proposed that nations can leverage trade as a tool for developing their respective economic and strategic goals, even if doing so will increase conflicts and disagreement in the context of trade war. In summary, neoliberalism is a theory of international relations that emphasizes how power influences state behavior in global system. Kenneth Walsh proposed that the hierarchical structure of the international system was sufficient to account for most of the crucial aspects of international relations, and that the states are the primary actors in international relations. Neoliberalism also proposed that nations can leverage trade as a tool for developing their respective economic and strategic goals, even if it increases conflict and disagreement in the context of trade war. Neoliberalism is a movement of artists that draw inspiration from the world around them. It is related to the trade war between the United States and China, as both countries are using trade as a tool to leverage each other. John J. Mishmel argues that China isn't can interfere with the conflict, and the United States is working to strengthen ties with other major powers in the region to counterbalance China.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad AZHAR, and for today I am going to present the analysis, or more specifically the implication of United States-China trade wars. The trade war had a significant impact on both countries and the global economy. The United States and China imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods, which led to higher prices for consumer, disrupted supply chain, and affected business and industries in both countries. The trade wars also had political implications, as it strained the relationship between the two superpowers and raised concern about the national security and global economic stability. However, In 2020, the two countries signed a Phase 1 trade deal, which included some tariff reduction and commitments by China to increase purchases of US goods and services. The Biden administration has signaled a willingness to engage with China on trade issues, but it remains to be seen how the relationship will evolve in the coming years. The United States-China trade wars had a significant implication on the international scale, which one of them is the global economic growth. The trade war had a negative impact on global economic growth, as the two largest economies in the world, the United States and China trade tension, had knock-on effects on other country economies, particularly those with close trade ties with either both countries. The United States-China trade wars had a negative impact on global economic growth for several reasons. First, the first trade wars disrupted global trade flow by imposing tariff on goods and services traded between the United States and China, which led to a higher cost of businesses and consumer and reduced demand for goods and services. As a result, the global trade volume declined and the growth of international trade slowed. Second, the trade war also had a spillover effect on the other countries, particularly those with close economic ties to the US and China. As the global trade flow were disrupted, countries that rely heavily on exports to either country were negatively impacted. These included countries such as Germany, Japan, and South Korea, which are major exporters of goods to China and United States. Second implication is the geopolitical implication. The United States-China trade war also had a geopolitical implication as it raised concerns about national security and global economic stability. It increased tension between the two countries and the highlighted competition between the United States and China for economic and political influence in the world. It's due to the shift of power. The trade war has highlighted the shift in the global power from the US to China. As the China economy continues to grow and its influence on the global stage increases, the trade war has led to a more assertive China, which has sought to challenge US dominance in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. Also, the impact on the alliances, the trade war has strained US alliances with countries in the Asia-Pacific region, which have close economic ties with China. The United States has pressured these countries to reduce their economic ties with China, which has led to tensions in these relationships. This has given China an opportunity to increase its influence in the region and build closer relationship with these countries.
It's important to note that the US-China trade war has largely been viewed as a negative development by most economists, policymakers and businesses due to its negative impacts on the global economy and international trade. However, some arguments have been made about the potential benefits on the trade war. First one is addressing unfair trade practices. One of the main reasons for the US-China trade war has been to address what the US saw as China unfair trade practices, such as intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, and state subsidy. By imposing tariff on the China goods and pressuring China to reform its trade policy, the US may be able to address some of these issues. The goal of addressing unfair trade practices is to create a more level playing field for companies and countries in international trade, and to promote fair competition that benefit all parties involved by eliminating or reducing practices that are seen as being unfair or discriminatory. Countries can create a more open and transparent trading system that benefit businesses and consumers around the world. Second benefit is balancing the trade deficit. The US-China trade war may also help to reduce the US trade deficit with China by limiting imports from Chinese goods, which could improve the US balance of trade and reduce its dependence on foreign goods. The goal of balancing the trade deficit is to create a more balanced and sustainable trade relationship between countries, which can benefit all parties involved. By reducing the trade imbalance, countries can promote greater economic stability, create more jobs, and improve their competitiveness in the global economy. However, it's important to note that this potential benefit come with significant costs, including higher price of the consumer, job losses, and a slowdown in global economic growth. Moreover, some of the trade policy pursued by the US, such as tariff, have led to retaliation by China and other countries, which has further escalated to the trade war and lead to further negative impacts on the global economy. Alright, I will continue for the recommendation part. For the recommendation part, while the trade war effect show that both the US and China suffered more pain than gain due to the vital roles in the global economy and international political landscape, both parties can benefit from the conflict's outcome by adopting the right foreign policy and executive approaches. Since the trade war was started by the US, especially by the Trump administration, this suggestion will focus on advising the Joe Biden administration. The first recommendation is escalation policy. Analysts said the US might use the trade war's escalation to shape its conflict resolution strategy. The US suffered less economically than China during the battle. The export depending Chinese economy explain this. According to the Lawrence Law, China over-reliance on its export sector may give the US an advantage. If the US were to impose an embargo on all China's export, China GDP could fall by 1.98% compared to 0.44% for the US. Yuan Zhang also stated that if the US imposes more tariff, Chinese companies may lose 15 billion USD in the region, giving that US an advantages in international negotiation. There was advantages and disadvantages of this method. For the advantages, it harms China economy more than it does to the United States in the ongoing period. It displays the United States commitment in deploying proactive measures to counter China international standing, and the last one is improve the United States multilateral engagement with this country in Pacific Asia Pacific region. While for the disadvantages cost the United States at least 232,000 loss in employment and 1.6 trillion USD loss in GDP, and damages the continuity of the United States agricultural sector as a result of the imposed tariff.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad ZUBAIR bin Muhammad ROSDI, and for this part I will be presenting the second recommendation, which is by implementing a de-escalation policy. De-escalation here refers to an approach that requires the two confronting nations to cease their hostilities for the sake of preventing further damage. Apparently, neither the US nor China had gained any benefit from the ongoing trade war due to the imposed tariffs and restrictions towards each other, and neither did the United States had achieved any of its outlined objective in initiating the conflict. Among the suggestions that can be introduced in the de-escalation of the trade war is that the two governments could gradually reduce the average tariff rates to be back at about 12% and reduce the ongoing restrictions. One of the advantages of de-escalating the trade war is that it could result in the US economy to generate up to $160 billion increase in real GDP, as well as to increase the 145,000 more employments by the year 2025. In addition, the domestic market of the United States will also enjoy lower inflation rate and consumer price if the de-escalation of the policy is to be adopted, as evidenced in the past 2 decades where the two variables were able to be maintained relatively low due to the US imports from China. Furthermore, as the objective of initiating the trade war were heavily associated with large trade deficits suffered by the US against China, the escalation may also help to resolve the imbalance by exploiting the distribution of exchange reserves between the two states. While it is evident that the de-escalation may provide positive economic outcomes in the context of international relations, the escalation also had serious implications that may cost the US their credibility and leadership in the international stage. One of the most significant consequences of de-escalating the trade war is that it will portray the US as disregarding the increasing world condemnation over China's human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims. China's image as an authoritarian state have long been tainted with reports of human rights violation and abuses due to their roles in the Uyghur-Chinese conflict. United Kingdom and some other countries around the world have labeled the conflict as a genocide in wake of the reported crime against humanity committed by the Chinese government against the said ethnic, and had begun imposing sanctions on Chinese officials as a form of retaliation. As the United States previously expressed their concerns over the Uyghur conflict, which according to the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, such a conflict is a threat towards a rules-based international order. Going backwards by lifting all the sanctions imposed through the de-escalation would undermine the US credibility and leadership for not only going against their preached liberal world order, but also for prioritizing domestic interests over multilateral engagement. Therefore, the escalation is only recommended if the US top priority is to enhance their domestic economy and the quality of life of the Americans in the long term. Their cooperation with China, though it will have serious repercussions on international relations. The next recommendation that I will be presenting is regarding the alternatives that the US could opt for in leveraging the current trade war situation against China. Among the policy options is that the US could adhere to the status quo, which translates to leaving the current imposed tariffs and sanctions as it was, in order to avoid the possibility of further retaliation from China. The US could also explore other approaches to expand their supply chain options and to reduce their liability over the ongoing conflict in addressing their reliance on China's economy. One of the suggestions to resolve this matter is by seeking alternative sources of supplies, which is by turning eyes towards the European Union as a trade partner. Among the advantages of this alternative approach is that the US may continue to pressure China using the already imposed sanctions while protecting their economy from further damages as a result of retaliation. This is because the US halts from further imposing tariffs and restrictions. Their strategies of partnering up with the EU to seek alternative supplies would prevent further hostile action from Chinese as the escalation when halted. In addition, the US may also diversify its supply chain through the proposed increase in economic partnership with the EU, thus leading the reduction of dependency on imports from the Chinese market. The EU currently ranked as the third largest economy globally, followed by the US and China. If there is any other alternative that could provide almost the exact supplies of goods imported from China, it will be the European Union. Furthermore, the US may be able to maintain the balance of power by strengthening ties with the EU, as both of the nations share a common interest of seeking to prevent the growth of China's international standing for its complete disregards of human rights and the rule-based international order. This approach, however, possesses one significant disadvantage that could hinder the United States' effort in leveraging the current trade war. The apparent barrier will be in the form of formulating negotiations with the European Union that may be complex. This is because the EU, like the US, have also relied heavily on the Chinese market. In 2020, China became the European Union's largest trading partner, with the latest imports and exports surged from 5.6% and 2.2% respectively as a result. Hence, it is improbable that the European Union would loosen its ties with China for the time being. Ultimately, alternative policy is highly recommended because it could help the US in regaining momentum over the global economy, thus providing superiority in the balance of power against China. The United States will also need to work hard in constructing better deals for the European Union in realizing this approach.
As a conclusion, trade war harm more than they protect. Trade war cause economic collapse, recession, trade dispute, and inflation. Donald Trump needs to be less aggressive towards the Chinese government to set the path for productive conversation in the long term and ensure that there will be constructive discussion. The US-China trade war must be settled for the benefit of the world through conversation, agreements, concessions, Chinese, and meetings. Even though Trump has been replaced by Joe Biden as US President. I think that's all from us. Thank you and Assalamualaikum.